Cheers. Welcome back. How we doing, folks? Let me catch up with live chat. And while I'm doing that, maybe let's see what's a point of discussion for today. Maybe here's a question. All right, 64 audio again, legendary in the space, known as pretty expensive. If you're watching this and you haven't already bought a 64 audio IEM, was price a significant factor for you? And does $1,100 change that equation for you a little bit? Kind of curious for people's appetite for an $1,100 IEM. I gotta say, in my opinion, there is something like mentally different about even a $1,500 IEM versus an $1,100 IEM. And it's nice to see 64 audio finally get to $1,100, which again is definitely not a cheap IEM, but it starts to feel within reach. Like, if I knew this is exactly what I wanted, I'd do it. I could justify that for myself. But yeah, let me catch up with live chat. Shimon, I appreciate you dropping in early, even though you're probably sleeping now, and I hope you're sleeping now. But thanks for keeping me company in the early minutes of this stream. Sir Apocalypse, how you doing? Good to see you, as always. And yeah, we've traveled into the future. For folks, it's not worth explaining. We won't talk about the U18s. Adrian, how you doing? Again, shout out to Adrian for loaning me his own personal Neo. I've been taking very good care of it, I promise. I'll return it to you in exactly the same condition eventually. All right, Samba Listens, how you doing? Samba Listens asking, wondering how this compares with the Helios. And that's an interesting comparison. I'll be honest, I don't have a Helios on hand. So if you're curious why it's not here on the table in this comparison, that would be a good reason why. And I'll say it's been, over a year since I've listened to the Helios. So take these impressions with a grain of salt. Because I can only kind of remember what I remember from the Helios. But the Helios just is definitely going to be a more vocal focused sound signature. A little bit thin in the lower mid-range, and I think that was a complaint that I had about it, is it came across a little bit thin. Kind of, honestly not too far off some of my complaints here with the Monarch. Now, again, I think this is a really good sounding IEM, and I think the Helios is also a really good sounding IEM. But if I'm being picky about something in those IEMs, that's where I'm going to be picky about. Is they're a little bit, they lack a little bit of body, whereas the 64 audio stuff clearly does not have that problem. 64 audio stuff just kind of trades that body, it adds a lot of body. It doesn't have quite the same sense of imaging that I think both the Monarch and the Helios have. The Helios, as I recall, also had just like a really good quality treble that I don't think the 64 audios don't have a very good quality treble. They actually have really good treble. Again, it's really smooth. It never gets sharp. It's never sibilant. And you get a good sense of, you get a good timbre on the high frequency percussion. It sounds right. It doesn't sound stick-like or anything like that. But there is just kind of like an extra resolution and texture in the treble that Symphonium seems to bring out in their IEMs, and the Helios is kind of a prime example of that. So that, I would say, is a standout difference. Whereas I think the bass quality and the body on the 64 audios is going to be better. Which one would I pick for myself? Well, I'd probably pick the 64 audios just because they fit me better. That would be my number one reason. And if I was basing it purely on sound, that would honestly be tougher. They're both kind of like specialists that do different things. So it would really depend on my mood. I would say the 64 audio stuff is probably more all-arounder. Like, it's going to appeal to more people and maybe appeal to more music, if that makes sense. But if you're listening to a lot of really strong vocal content, like an artist I like to listen to named Ghostly Kisses, she would probably sound the best on the Helios, if I'm honest. VX Ace asking, how does it compare to the Truth Ear Ola, though? Well, I would say that the cable of the Truth Ear Ola compares favorably, as that's exactly what I've got on here. In fact, shout out to the Truth Ear Ola for making kind of a stealth appearance on this table. In fact, 3 times, because I've got a Truth Ear Ola cable on this. I talked about not using the stock cable because it was a little bit on the kinky side. The Truth Ear Ola cable it behaves better. It looks nicer, it's tidier, and it's inexpensive. And Adrian had the same idea because he's got a Truth Ear Ola cable on his Neo. And I've also got a Truth Ear Ola cable on my 7th Acoustics Supernova. So shout out to the Ola. If you want a nice cable with good behavior, and there's nothing fancy about this, right? If you're looking for a really plush cable that's going to improve the sound quality of your IEMs, look to somebody else to give you advice on that. But if you're just looking for a cable that behaves nicely and, as you can see, coils up nice and tidy, the Truth Ear Ola cable is actually pretty stellar, and you can get the IEM for 19 bucks. I've got 3 of the IEMs now. Only one of them still has its cable, so obviously, shout out to the Ola. Where One Nation saying, I saw the Graph teaser the same day Precog posted his review. Man, I really want this, but there are cheaper options. I mean, isn't that always be the case? I'm trying to think, what would be like a good alternative to this sound at a less expensive price? To be honest, maybe like the closest I can think of would be something like the Dunu EST112. I think the EST112 does similar things. Like the reasons that I like the EST112 are the same reasons that I like the 64 audio IEMs. I do really think that the U4s does that significantly better than the EST, and a lot of that, like the treble quality in the EST is leaves a little bit to be desired, and maybe also just like that sense of volume and physicality. The EST112 did it pretty well, but it's a little bit more vocal focus, maybe like somewhere in between the Neo and the U4s in that regard. But that would be like the closest I can think of that's like sub $1,000. Maybe there's also a parallel with the Kinda Lava, the Let Sure Kinda Lava, or even the EJ07M standard version a little bit. Tuning, they're not exactly the same thing, but where they are kind of similar is that I think the treble quality on those 2 IEMs comes across a little bit on the dark and reserved side. And it's very smooth, and you're not going to have any issues with it, similar with the 64 audio stuff. But I just bring up that darkness because despite it being fairly vocal forward on the Kinda Lava, it still comes across with an overall warm tilt to it that is reminiscent of what you get here on the 64 audio stuff. And the real similarity is going to be in like the bass quality, where I think the bass on the Kinda Lava is just awesome. And I can't think of better bass under $1,000 for that. And above $1,000, this is probably where you start getting into bass that, is it better than Kinda Lava bass? It's maybe more natural sounding, and also has like a similar level of physicality. So maybe in that sense it's better. But I would say they're both really, really quite satisfying in that way. David Ball and Sup Huck saying that the U4s is better than the Ola in every single way, except the cable. And that's sadly true. I mean, the cable, again, the stock cable is fine. You can live with it, but you can also improve it for 19 bucks, and I did. Sup Rodrigo Montoya saying, now I need $1,000 USD. In fact, you need $1,100 USD. Godspeed. Static Age, how you doing? Let's see if my wallet will be lighter after this stream. Well, I'm kind of curious. After this stream, is your wallet saved, or are you more tempted than ever? And maybe here's another question to pose to folks, because there have been, I would say, more people than I was expecting are interested in potentially buying the U4s. And I hope that this review helped you understand whether or not it is for you. If this review comes across as overly positive or overly negative, what am I gonna say about that? I don't know. Ask me still. Like, what is the thing that would push you over the edge, either way, that maybe I haven't clarified yet that I could clarify for you? Because again, I think this thing sounds awesome. This thing was sent to me on loan, and I think I'm gonna buy it and keep it for myself. But yeah, I'm curious for you. What's the deciding factor? And did I clarify it already, or is there something else I could say to help you? Wear One Nation saying easy 5 out of 5. The IEM of the year for Mark will probably be a fight between the Supernova and the U4s. Just to be clear, but I understand why you wrote that. Close, but no. I'm not picking bests on this table, but I will say this is the 1 5-star here on the table. These all I gave 4 stars. There is something especially special about the Supernova for me, for my preferences. I'm not going to say that all of you are going to prefer the Supernova versus U4s. This would be my next favorite on the table. Definitely, this is going to be the one for some of you if you want that warm, thick bass sound. Again, it's more than just about the bass. It really does lend itself to a body and a physicality behind the entire sound. Reproduction that this doesn't really nail. This does, but I think at more the sacrifice of technical performance. And this does just in a very different way. This is definitely more, this is closer to this than it is to that in terms of that body and that weight, if that makes sense. Carl Schmiel asking who's at the Ola cable. Yes, indeed. And Carl Schmiel also agreeing that it's an amazing cable. Cool. That's the other thing that's kind of funny about this Ola cable business is I thought it was a hack that I just kind of like plopped it on the U4s and was like, oh, that's actually a really nice match. But then as I'm just noticing that more and more people are using the Ola cable on IEMs that are not the Ola, and it's a good hack, the Ola cable hack. VXA saying, yeah, the Ola cable, the stock cable is really weird, to be honest. The 2-pin interconnect feels really weird. I don't mind the 2-pin interconnect too much. I mind the kinks. Not the kink shame. Kinks are fine, but not for my cables. Wear One Nation asking, is this an end game for bass heads? And I might be the wrong person to ask because I'm definitely not a bass head. But if you're looking for really good quality bass and like good amounts of it, all right, with especially, where did I put it? With especially the M20 modules here, I would say this is a very bassy IEM, and it's very good quality. Is it end game? Oof. I would honestly consult a real bass head to answer that question with fidelity. Is there another IEM with similar levels of bass that I like more? That's a tough question. Maybe the Trio. It's been so long since I've heard the Trio. But the Trio is the one that at least my memory of it is an even better, deeper, richer quality bass, but that could just be nostalgia at this point. It's been so long. Spare Adam saying, oh, there's filters. Yeah, there are 4 of them, and they actually do something. In fact, let's we can talk about this live since we're past the review. I don't mind a little bit of graph talk. What are we doing here? Let's jump over here and take a look at the U4s frequency response graph. All right. Let's not make it bright green so it's a little bit easier to see. But this is the frequency response of the U4s that we just got done describing with the M20 module. So this is the bassiest module. And as you can see, that is a hefty bit of bass. That is not the most bass, right? If I wanted to get silly amounts of bass, you can look at something like the Dorado. And while that might not look like necessarily more bass because they're lining up similarly, let's align them at 1,000 hertz and you kind of get a sense for how much goofier in the bass you can get, all right? Some people that are bass heads, that's what they want. The U4s does not do that. So that's why I'm like, consult a real bass head. But let's go back to the 64 Audio U4s and describe these different filters, right? So here's what it looks like with the M15 module, which is kind of until now been the in-between bass setting. And you can see that it does drop the sub bass. It drops from about, 80 hertz down by about 1 to 2 dB. I would say that it is noticeable, but it's not quite as much as I wanted in some of the other past 64 audio IEMs, because if I go now to the MX module, you'll see that it's now a big drop in the bass, and I've always wanted something that kind of landed in between. The 64 audio IEMs that I've tried with the MX module, the U4s and the Neo, are actually really good examples of it. Still sound fantastic, and they actually sound, I would say, bassier than they even look here on a graph. Something about the physicality behind it, but nonetheless, I still think that these IEMs, they want to be bassy, right? Just let them be bassy. But I wanted something that was maybe somewhere in between. And so now we've got the M12 module, which is the gold one that I've got on now. And you can see where that lands. It's actually kind of just in the middle. And I would say that now the M12 is a noticeable step down from the M20, right? That's a pretty significant step down in bass levels and a nice balance in between on the way to the MX module. Now, exactly which one you're going to prefer, I don't know. If you're like me, I kind of like going between the M12, the M20, and the MX, depending on my mood, depending on what I'm listening to. And kind of also depends on what I'm listening to it in contrast with. But yeah, I don't know. It's fun to have all three of those. They all actually matter in a way that sometimes tuning filters don't really matter. Real audio review saying 64 audio always pushes the limit to what's possible. That'll like. What do you mean by that? What's the limit that's being pushed here? I'm curious. How would you describe it? Huck saying it's a husky boy. Yeah, I'd say that most of 64 Audio's IEMs I would describe as kind of in the husky range, although not all of them. You've got things like the U18s, the U18T. They sound mostly just kind of neutral. Maybe even so mostly just neutral that you might not ever review it because you didn't have anything interesting to say about it. Maybe, I don't know. What's up, Dom Q? How you doing? Ace of Spades, how you doing? Guessing 4 stars pretty early. Good guess. Zest Defender, guessing 5 out of 5. I feel like it's in his voice. Make no mistakes. I didn't give it 5 stars, but I'm pretty excited about this IEM. I enjoy it quite a bit. Dom Q asking, I wonder how this stacks up against the Monarch Mark II. Hopefully I answer your question. But yeah, if you have any questions about that comparison that I didn't quite get to, hit me up. Oh yeah, and Dom Q, I also checked out Wild Painting a little bit. I did like them. It sounds like Zest Defender did as well. Matthew Ole saying, how does this compare to their C IEMs like the A4, 6, 12s, and N8? What would I recommend from their C IEMs? So I don't have any custom 64 audio IEMs, so I'm probably not going to be much of a help in answering that question. But what I will say is, I'm very hesitant. I don't have any custom IEMs at all. Just kind of hesitant about the whole process, and I'm hesitant about investing a lot of money into a thing with a kind of a long lead time before I get to the point where I get to hear it and understand if I'm satisfied or not, all right? That's kind of just my general apprehension around custom IEMs, is that when you take a sound, even if you've got the chance to listen to something in a universal format, like you can here with the U4s, and 64 Audio sells the A4s, which is the custom version of ostensibly the same sound signature, you get to hear the universal thing, but it's not necessarily going to sound the same once it's a custom IEM, because there's so much that's changed about how that IEM is now interacting with your ear canal because it's a custom. And I would want to think that they're pretty good at matching them so that the end result is a predictable result, but I don't know a lot of people that have done these things, right? It's expensive and again a lengthy process, but I do know that homie Precog Vision, he actually got the A4s as a custom IEM, and I think he was kind of disappointed in the result of it. It sounded like the treble was maybe a little bit dark for him, but if you've been following his Reddit thread, or not Reddit thread, his HeadFi thread, you'll know that he actually sold his U12T to replace it here with the A4s. So the universal version of the IEM he likes better than the custom version that he got made for himself. And then I think the same thing is true of Critical, there was the N8, and then they made a custom version of it, and he was pretty disappointed with the custom version. He made a really funny YouTube video long ago talking about his frustrations and disappointment in the universal version of the N8. So I don't know that I could blind recommend getting any custom, to be honest. Even if I like the universal. And again, for me, like, I'm not that interested in the customs because I don't have a use case where I need that level of fit security. I understand why a custom makes sense if you're performing on a stage and you absolutely cannot be fiddling with the fit of your IEMs while you're performing. Totally makes sense to me. I don't do anything that high stakes when I'm listening to IEMs, if I'm perfectly honest. The worst I do, or the most demand that I put on the fit of my IEMs, is I wear them while I sleep. So pretty comfortable doing that with universals generally. So not too interested in the customs myself. But I'm curious, Matthew, as someone who's interested in the customs, obviously, what is it that, do you have like a particular use case where the custom is a necessity, or do you just kind of see it as like the gradual upgrade from universals? I'm kind of curious about that. Ace of Spades asking MEST Mark II versus the U4s. Yeah, that would have been a pretty interesting comparison. Unfortunately, again, I don't have an MEST Mark II on hand, and it's been a while since I heard one. It's been over a year. At least I believe it. Yeah, I think it's been over a year since I heard one. So this no, actually, wait. I heard, what did I hear? At Can Jam, I heard Hux, not the Mark II. I forget what the name of that model was, but anyway, it's been a while. What can I say about them though? And from memory, I want to say that the MEST has probably got a stronger sense of imaging, and again, that delineation between sounds and that 3D spaciousness, the MEST does better. Where I think the 64 audio does a better job is going to be in terms of just kind of having this organic, natural sound. The MEST can come across maybe a little bit unnatural, in almost kind of a similar way that like an all BA set, like maybe the Softier Studio 4 can come across a little bit artificial sounding. I think the MEST can sometimes come across that way, and it doesn't really bother me too much. But if you're looking for differences and how you might make a decision between those two, those are, I would say, a pretty distinct difference between the MEST and the U4s. Apart from that, the MEST has driver flex, which kind of bothered me, especially in such an expensive IEM. Fit on them, I would say, is probably pretty similar. Maybe the MEST fits me a little bit better, but again, this is from pretty long-term memory. Dick Butt asking, is this the most bling on the table ever? I think the last time I did 64 audio IEM reviews, I reviewed the Neo, the U12T, the U18T, and the Trio, and maybe the Forte. Did I review all 5 of them at once? I might have. I think at the time it was like, over $10,000 in IEMs on the table. This is not quite $10,000 of an IEMs. This is probably too much in terms of dollars for IEMs, but it's not quite that much. These might be the best looking ones though, so if that's the bling you were talking about, maybe. Hello there, saying, nice to see 64 audio tackling the budget segment, lol. Yeah. I mean, it's all relative, right? Oh no, YouTube, you jumped me. You did it. Why you do me like that? All right, we're back. Yeah, I see some more appreciation or Carl noticing the Ola cables. All the Ola cables, that's right. There are many of them. Ben saying they look nice, but I'm not sure how much better it is than my SA6. They do things very, very differently. Like I would say, you know, the SA6 might even be a little bit better in terms of vocal resolution, but that would be like kind of like the one narrow area where I say the SA6 is better than the U4s. Everywhere else, I would say that I would give the advantage to the U4s. They're probably maybe similar in terms of delineation and imaging quality, maybe a little bit toward the SA6, but yeah, they're similar in that area. But just, yeah, much stronger bass presence, much stronger depth to the bass here on the U4s. And then again, that body and physicality behind the sound is just kind of the thing that's pretty unique to 64 Audio's IEMs, if I'm honest. And Where One Nation is saying, yeah, bass quality would be my reason, which I think makes sense. I mean, the SA6 has got pretty decent bass, but I would say it's probably its weakest part. Whereas here, I would say it's kind of the strength. SKJ Alliance saying, these are amazing. I'm just waiting for my M12 module. Right on. So actually, so it sounds like SKJ, maybe you bought one of these and they're sending you the M12 module. I'm curious how that works. Because again, the M12 module does not come in the package. But if I see all the marketing that they're doing around selling this IEM, they're saying you buy this IEM, you get the M12 module. So I'm curious about how that's happening. And it sounds like maybe they shipped them separately and they're a little bit delayed for you. Cow saying, I would love these with the MX modules. Need a side-by-side with the MIM Dark Magician Mark 1. Interesting. I mean, I'll be honest, I much prefer the U4s to the Dark Magician, but if you're a big Dark Magician fan already, you know what you like. I'm gonna actually power through this a little bit. I hate to do this, but I'm in a little bit of a rush. I need to wrap this up and get to the post office to pick up a package, which it's got to be another review item. I actually don't even know what it is, but I have a couple of suspicions. David K saying that $300 to $400 is my personal max, and the thing that's at my mailbox might be in that price range if I've got it right. Where One Nation saying $1,100 is still a very sizable amount of money. IMO. Most people can't afford an IM at half the price. Yeah, I agree. I mean, like most people that are not in the hobby, spending $300 on a pair of earphones sounds stupid. I get it. But I think around $300 for people that are in the hobby starts to feel like that's attainable. You know, one day once I find something I'm really confident in, I'll spend $300. $1,100 I understand is just kind of like another level beyond that, but at least it's more within reach than something like the U12T at $2,000. I think it's also just like it's easier for me to justify. Maybe that just kind of depends. You know, that's where I'm at. That $1,100 is a lot easier to justify than $2,000. But obviously, there are people for whom $2,000 is pretty easy to justify as well. Zest Defender saying, I struggle and want to spend much over $100. Yeah, I get that. VXA saying, make that step up from Chi-Fi to 64 Audio was a jump, but from my experience, it's totally worth it. Yeah, so VXA has a couple, actually, you said 3 different 64 Audio IEMs. 64 Audio specifically, continuing with what you said, seems to have that professionalism and technical skill that is worth it. They also have, it seems like, pretty good support. I was talking with, I think it was Adrian was saying that they offer like repairs on their products for like a fixed $100 or something like that, which is pretty good. I mean, obviously you can buy a whole other IEM for $100, but it's probably not gonna sound like this. Cruncho saying, unfortunately not at $1,100. My reach was the SA6 and I'm loving it, but I am not made of money. Totally understand. VXA, so many Ola cables, and Adrian saying not enough Ola cables. Kind of agree. I could use more. Ace of Spades saying $1,000 to $1,500 is right on my budget, considering a used Tia Trio or a Noble Sultan. And yeah, that's kind of the interesting thing at this price range, right? $1,100. It's within the range, you know. There's no 64 Audio that you can get this cheap, but there are 64 Audio IEMs you can get this cheap that are used. And if you're interested or you're comfortable with buying used, what you're able to afford starts to change quite a bit. And I'll be upfront, like I buy used IEMs fairly frequently. In fact, this one I bought used, the Monarch Mark II I bought used, because that made it within reach of me where I felt comfortable paying that much for it. Jonathan Lerner asking, at what price do I think the price to performance really falls off? For me, and I think this kind of, again, it depends on, how much extra money means to you, and also how much the extra performance means to you. But for me, I think around $600 to $700 is where I can get stuff that I am satisfied with. Like I don't need anything better than something like the Supernova, the Moondrop S8, even honestly, the Moondrop Blessing 2 at $300 is still kind of one of my favorite IEMs. And beyond that, it's like different flavors of things and different specialties. And sometimes I like those specialties and sometimes I don't. But I do think that, like $600-700 is where you can really you can start to taste exactly what you're going to hear at the high end of the market. But just maybe not in exactly the flavor you're looking for. Where One Nation agreeing, saying, I think it starts falling after Blessing 2 price. I agree, but I think Blessing 2 is actually kind of a standout there. There's not a lot of other IEMs at that price range that I think are nearly as good as the Blessing 2. Carl Schmiel asking, what are our benchmarks at $1,000? Me personally, I would say something like the MEST, and now this U4s would be kind of my favorites at around that price. Or I can get the Supernova, which personally is my favorite IEM on the table, and it's cheaper. But again, it's not going to be for everybody. Dexy Storm asking, how does it compare with the variations? Can I do a nozzle side-by-side? Okay, I'll do the nozzle side-by-side. I'll say that 64 audio nozzles tend to be somewhat on the narrow side, right? You can see this versus something like this nozzle, which I would say is kind of a medium-large nozzle. You get a sense for, yeah, the 64 audios tend to have somewhat narrow. But you can see, again, it is somewhat on the long side as well. And sorry, what was the question specifically? How does it compare versus the variations? Again, similarly, I haven't heard the variations in a long time, but the variations kind of probably closer to how I described this versus this, right? The variations has almost no sense of body to the lower mid-range and upper bass, whereas this has all the body in the world, and that makes them almost polar opposites in that way. Bruno asking, should I sell all of my 5 IEMs to get this? You have the Awful Performer 5, the T2, the Heyday, the Simgot EA5, and the Blessing 2. Ooh, you had to say Blessing 2. I'm going to decline to answer that question. But I would say, if you think you'd be happier with one IEM, yeah, I don't know, just do it. Sometimes it's better, and that's kind of like a trap that's pretty easy to fall into this game. It's just buying stuff that you can afford at the time while longing for things that you can't afford, and then you end up amassing a collection that costs more than the thing that you wanted to buy in the first place. I would say that's somewhat of an unfair characterization, because it's like there's also the benefit in my mind of having the variety and be able to switch around and like, no, I feel like this today, I feel like that today, and having a couple of different IEMs to bounce between. And then there's also just, the exploration of it, the curiosity of the whole hobby and being able to explore rather than like making one big bet and hoping you made the right bet. So I don't think it's the wrong decision to make. In fact, it's probably the decision I've more gravitated toward is the exploratory, buy what I can afford and just kind of like understand what I like in audio. But once you know what you like, if you know that this is what you like, I'd say go for it. Brian Dong asking, Meteor versus U4s. Yeah, the Meteor has like a similar sense of body and weight behind it and thickness, but it's done very, very differently. Yeah, and I don't know how much of that is just the balanced armature thing versus a hybrid. But I would say that if you like the Meteor sound, I think the U4s is like a nice step up in terms of technical performance, but it doesn't do all of the exact same things as the Meteor. All right. Sorry, I'm zooming through this, folks. I'm missing some really good stuff, but I appreciate it. Again, if you want to carry the conversation on outside of these live streams, join me on Discord. I'm there way too much. If you ask me a question, I'm probably going to answer you there. Carl asking, which IEM do I sleep with? I sleep with, saying it sounds dirty. Well, I get around, I guess. I sleep with every IEM that comes through here. It's true. VX Ace, I thought you were just saying something about the sound isolation difference being no joke, but then YouTube jumped me. YouTube's trying to tell me something, but I appreciate that comment. Yeah, to be honest, I didn't play around much with the sound isolation. It's just not a thing I test that much, because mostly I listen to IEMs at home, and don't have a lot of sound going on at home, except my wife watching K-dramas. Oh, and VX, you've actually got 4 different 64 audio IEMs. Thank you for the correction. Wow. Scrolling through. What's up, Rob Hawk? Thanks for joining. U2 is a great spy plane and a good band. They were a good band. And I think on that note, folks, I'm going to have to wrap up this live stream. Thank you all for joining. Thank you all for the questions, the conversation, and just overall, thanks for being homies. If you haven't already, on your way out, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, ding the YouTube bell, and again, join me on Discord, where we have conversations about audio all day. And then until the next super review, have a good week, have a good weekend, and I'll catch you later. Cheers.